Hello and welcome to my review of the World War II miniatures rules for Bolt Action. This is the second edition. The book has come out about July 2016. You can get these at different hobby stores that would carry it. And this has been the result of the authors and the developers hearing from the Bolt Action community basically across the entire world, that they gave the developers and designers their feedback on the good points and the not so good points. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this book. Definitely compared to the first edition book, this one's a little bit thicker, which, okay, that means there's some more goodies that are packed in. So when we go and look, this is made by Warlord Games, but it is also Osprey Games. It's Osprey that publishes the book, which Osprey is known for having a long list of military history books or books that cover certain weapons in different wars or the uniforms of different armies that have fought in different wars pretty much throughout history. And all the Osprey books, they'll have paintings / drawings like these throughout their books. Okay, so nice you have the table of contents. What's really nice about this is the first thing after the introduction, they give you the timeline, which is absolutely perfect if the person doesn't know anything about World War II. For some people, this may be their first time going to an historical miniatures game. They may be coming from a fantasy background or maybe a science fiction background, but that's okay. If you happen to know absolutely nothing about World War II, this timeline will give you a very brief, big picture view as far as what particular front, the year, and approximately the dates and the name of the particular action. Whether it was a declaration of war or it was talking about a certain campaign. And it talks a little bit about the forces that were involved. And then as you can see up here and down here, you have models. These are 28mm in scale, and they are used as part of the game where one miniature human represents one soldier, one vehicle represents one vehicle, and one artillery piece represents one artillery piece. So you have an opportunity to go and explore World War II. You also have, again, paintings, pictures of battles in progress. The idea is to give eye candy to the book for some people. This is a wonderful addition. There are people who prefer just the rules, and I don't care about the eye candy, but everybody has their own tastes, different strokes for different folks. So again, we can look at Western Europe and you'll see pictures where they have their own miniatures with their own terrain in some really awesome poses. But again, it gives you the information, which is really cool, and it breaks it down by front, like the Northern European front, the Russian front, the Mediterranean front, so we can think about North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and then of course we have the Western front where you think about Normandy, going into France, going into Belgium, like the Battle of the Bulge. And then, of course, with the Russian front, it keeps going throughout the war, where the Russians attack in 1944 in Operation Bagration, and then all the way through to the final Battle of Berlin. But what is also different about this book, ladies and gentlemen, is that it does include the army lists for late war, which is 1944-45, for the United States, Britain, Germany, Russia, and, as an extra bonus, Japan. So for those people who want to go and recreate battles in the Pacific, you have that here. But I am kind of getting ahead of myself here. But anyways, so you can see that we have the timeline, and then it talks about the basic supplies. What is it that you need? Okay, like a tape measure, dice, markers. You also have order dice. You don't have to have order dice, but it is a useful thing to have. There are several orders that you can give your units, And it is random activation, meaning for every unit you have on the table, you get one order dice. You put that into a bag or a container that is opaque, nobody can see it, and when it comes down to who goes first on the turn, you randomly pick one of the dice out of the bag. Now, there are two colors of dice in the bag, one for each side. So let's say gray is for the Germans, green is for the Americans. If you pull out a green die, the American gets to choose a unit and be able to do its actions for that turn with that unit. One of the things about the game also is that you are able to move, you are able to shoot, and if you are successful at shooting, you may cause casualties to the other side. If not, you automatically get to pin them. Pinning, think of it as suppression. Think of it that your troops are being shot at with a lot of bullets and they're ducking for cover. They're not exactly ready to fight back. They're not listening to anybody. They're just trying to survive. And that's with the effects of pinning. And here, these apparently are the official Bolt Action pin markers now that they're using, which I have some, and I can say they are very, very useful. I use them in the other games like Black Powder and Hail Caesar. Now, at the same time, in addition to the eye candy, you'll get pictures of the actual weapons that are also involved. Okay, it also talks about measurement, line of sight, how close can guys be together in order to function. Okay, then they talk about the units, which you have three basic kinds. You have infantry, artillery, and vehicles. It also talks about models and bases in terms of contact. Then it talks about the turn, preparing for play, what is the turn sequence, and it goes through that. And then losing dice, the only way you lose order dice is if your unit gets destroyed on the field, where you literally, all your men are taken as casualties and they're off the board, or they are literally pinned out of existence. That's just giving you guys an idea. Orders, the next section. There are several orders you can give. Firing, stand and fire, advance, you move a certain distance, you can still fire, but there's a penalty. Run, you're just running like crazy. Ambushing, basically you give up your turn to shoot and you're waiting for the enemy to move, and the enemy moves into your line of sight, then you can shoot as a surprise. That's the ambush. Rally works great if your men, your unit, are pinned. Rally allows the removal of pin markers. You got down also, that's another order where if somebody is firing on your unit, you can immediately order to get down. Think about it as taking cover, trying to hide, trying not to get hit. Of course, there's the orders test and all that. Movement, okay, you've got the rules of governing movement in terrain. How does terrain affect the movement? Shooting, again, there's a procedure for that. Can you see your target? You declare your target. You're not allowed to pre-measure the range. What happens is you need to roll your dice to shoot. If it is within range, okay. If it is out of range, then you roll the dice for absolutely nothing, which happens kind of like in real life. Sometimes soldiers overestimate the effective range of their weapons, whether it's a rifle or a machine gun. Okay. It also talks about, as we move on, it talks about the different kinds of terrain that you can have. How does that work? Okay. We can talk about vehicle combat. How often can they hit each other? What are the effects of hitting? Then we talk about weapons. We can talk about the type, the range. How many dice do they roll? That's how many shots. Do they penetrate armor or not? Rifles can't penetrate armor, but a bazooka can in comparison. So there are charts for that, and I'm going to be moving onward. Now there's also the assault. Think of it as close combat, where you're getting in the face of the enemy to try to push them off of whatever it is you're trying to push them off of. Maybe it's pushing them out of a building, or maybe it's taking a hilltop, okay, because your colonel wants it for whatever reason. Now, there's also different types of weapons. We've talked about close quarters very quickly. It talks to you about the right way to do close quarters. And again, you know, throughout the book, you have pictures of nicely done models. You also have paintings, pictures. These do appear in the Osprey books, so they have a really great advantage there. Headquarters units, it talks about, you know, what do superior officers do, because they do have some advantages. Forward observers for artillery. It talks about how to resolve artillery, what is a smoke barrage, an airstrike chart, if you have that. Okay. And then, of course, there's rules for special units. It depends. You don't have to use all the rules for special units if all you have are regular infantry and they're fighting each other. Then pretty much you can ignore the section. But it does take into account things like motorcycles, snipers, stubborn soldiers, tough fighters, things like that. We also have artillery. How does that work? How do you call that in? All right. Does it hit on target? If it doesn't, what do you do? If it does hit on target, then an improvement in this edition compared to the first edition, and I'm going to show it in the back because I don't have the template yet, but this is the new template that they use for determining which soldiers get hit by the artillery blast. There's basically 4 different kinds. You have a 1-inch wide template, a 2-inch wide template, a 3-inch wide template, and a 4-inch wide template. Essentially, what it is, you pick a spot where the enemy is at. If your artillery lands or your mortar lands on it, you put the template in the center of that point you picked, and then you roll to see if the bombardment affected the soldiers inside the template ring. That's how it works. Okay. Moving on, there's a separate section dealing with vehicles, and again, vehicle characteristics, what can vehicles see, what they cannot see, talk about damage value tables. One of the nice things as I've looked through this book, we have also seen how they rearrange the charts for the stats that you would need in order to play the game, depending. Okay. Now, for playing a game, they tell you what would that look like, preparing the battlefield, what would you need to do. I kind of noticed how they made these tables stand out a little bit more on that. That is definitely kudos to the guys at Warlord Games for that, because now it's a whole lot easier to see it compared to just being black and white and that's it. The shades of gray draw the eye to it and make that happen. Battle scenarios. Well, there are more scenarios in this edition compared to the first edition, which is really cool. But again, nothing stops you from making up your own scenarios, because pretty much, if you can come up with a story for a battle, it pretty much happened. Remember, this is man-to-man combat. We're not talking like General Patton was present. No, we're talking about Sergeant O'Hara. We're talking about, you know, Feldwebel Steiner, those guys. You know, Lieutenant Smith, Captain Jones, those guys. Those are the ones who would be participating. This is the kind of level that they would be at. But anyways, you have scenarios that will give you the background for it, how to achieve victory. It also gives you a map, how to set up, what are the limitations to setting up. Okay. So that's really cool. Now, they also have a selector, a force selector. This is a very basic one on how to pick your platoons. It's not like, oh, I gather a bunch of troops and put them on the table. No, there are limits to what you can do, and they try to relate that to what was historically available. So if you have something in 1945, and it is Americans attacking the Germans, and the Germans end up having a few more assault rifles than they would, you know, 2 years ago, that would make sense, because historically that happened. But the Americans, on the other hand, you know, they have some extra goodies for them. I'm not going to give those away. But it does go by nationality. And as you can see here, the Wehrmacht Infantry Squad, your basic squad, it tells you the cost, the composition, the weapons they have, and then it gives you the options and the point values for it. And if there are any special rules that apply. And they got this in a nice, neat little box. It's very eye-catching, very easy to see. Now, they've also done the same thing with tanks. They've done this with guns as weapons, tank destroyers, transports. They have that. So this is also the United States version, Great Britain, okay? And then, of course, at that point, you also have Russians as well. So there's a lot of options. Yes, they do have the Katyusha rocket launcher as well. And then you also have, I mentioned earlier, the forces of Japan. So, appendices, this is extra stuff in there. They have rules for night fighting, for example, which is really cool. What do you do with multiple players? How do you handle that? Okay. And with that, they give you a rule summary, which I know somebody has put that out on the web, which is very, very useful. All in all, I think this is definitely worth the buy. There are definitely some rule changes. I honestly think it is for the better. So, you know what? I would say definitely thumbs up to Bolt Action, the second edition. It's got my approval. Take care.